It was a typical summer day during the American Revolution, and fighting raged across the northeast of what would become the United States. But a little further west, deep in a forest far from the battlefield, something completely unseen was happening. Unknown to anyone but the local Indian tribes, 2 alien spacecraft suddenly crash-landed. The local tribes heard the terrifying sound and cautiously moved in to investigate. They kept their distance, completely unsure what they were looking at or what kind of danger this represented. Then, one of the crafts hissed open, and several figures emerged. They were tall, scaly, bipedal beings. They hurried out of the wreckage and bolted into the trees. The tribes, terrified by the sight, immediately ran off to warn their villages. Moments later, the second craft opened, and another group appeared. This time, strange, mechanical bipedal figures stepped out. The American Revolution had just gained 2 new silent enemies. They started investigating the area, cautiously looking around both crafts. One of them entered the first ship and began to search inside, while the other 11 took up a defensive posture, circling the crafts and looking outward into the dense forest. After a few moments, the first figure emerged from the ship. The 12 of them grouped together, crouching low to the ground, seemingly discussing their findings in hushed tones. Suddenly, the air was shattered by the sound of distant explosions and weapons fire. One of them pulled a small device from his side and held it up, pointing it in the direction of the noise. Then, as one, they all stood up and began to follow that first figure, moving swiftly through the forest towards the chaotic sounds. After several minutes, they broke through the trees into a large clearing, and what they saw before them was a massive battle raging. This was the time America was fighting for independence, and they had just stumbled upon one of its many fierce battles. The fledgling nation was on the brink of collapse, losing a desperate battle. But this was no ordinary war. On the other side of the conflict, another group of aliens, the very ones being tracked, watched and waited. As the human armies clashed in the open field, chaos erupted. The first alien faction stormed the battlefield, their attacks indiscriminate, hitting both sides. Immediately after, the mechanical aliens joined the fray, their primary target the first alien group. The battlefield descended into absolute pandemonium. Human soldiers scattered in terror. Some retreated to their lines, others mistakenly ran towards the enemy, and a few were just lost in the swirling vortex of combat. Just then, the 12 other aliens who had been tracking the first group finally arrived, ready to enter the 3-way war. Out of nowhere, a new group of aliens rushed onto the battlefield. They immediately started attacking the first group, creating total chaos. This gave the human soldiers caught in the crossfire a chance to escape. It was terrifying for everyone. Nobody understood what was happening or who these newcomers were. One moment, they were fighting what felt like a gentleman's war, and the next, bodies were flying through the air. The ground was littered with casualties. After a brutal clash, the first alien faction retreated back into the forest, leaving the 12 mysterious aliens standing alone. Seeing an opportunity, the British side fired a cannon. The cannonball soared through the air and struck one of the 12 aliens dead on. What would happen next? He flew through the air, tumbling across the battlefield, finally landing hard right near the American lines. The soldiers immediately scattered, keeping their distance but maintaining a defensive stance, muskets raised. Then the impossible happened. The figure that had been hit by the cannonball slowly stood up. He raised his arms toward the British side, and in absolutely perfect, clear English, his voice echoing across the smoke-filled field, everyone heard him yell, "Really, what the hell was that for?" The other 11 figures rushed over to make sure he was okay. But the one who took the hit brought his hands up to his head, grabbed hold, and with a distinct hiss, he twisted and pulled off what the American and British soldiers instantly realized was a helmet. As the dust settled, the shocking, undeniable truth hit them all at once. These so-called aliens were human. They saw it then, the undeniable human features on his face. And shortly after, the other 11 did the same, dropping their helmets to the ground. The silence was deafening. Both sides of the battle lines, the Reds and the Blues, were utterly shocked and confused. This wasn't supposed to happen. Then, one of the 12 raised a hand, addressing the entire field. Again, in perfect, clear English, he stated they meant no one any harm. Slowly, cautiously, the human soldiers on both sides began to relax their rigid, defensive postures. Weapons were still held tight, but curiosity was starting to override fear. The soldiers approached the 12, closing the circle. But as the crowd pressed in, 2 other soldiers, one from each of our armies, stepped even closer. The 12 tensed. They were completely surrounded now. In a swift, synchronized motion, they spun, their backs touching, creating an impenetrable defensive circle against all of us. The American soldier slowly brought his hand up, speaking softly. "We are not going to hurt you," he said. Then he cautiously asked, "Do you understand me?" One of the 12 figures immediately replied, "Yes, we understand you. We are human also." What a stupid question. That unexpected response instantly brought the temperature down. The tension broke, and the soldiers became visibly more relaxed. A few of them even started to laugh. Then the British soldier stepped forward, rapidly firing off questions. "Who are you? Where did you come from? What are you doing here? And what were those other things that attacked us?" One of the 12 raised a hand, pausing him. Wow, too many questions all at once. Let's back that train up for a second. First, we are human, just like you. Second, we come from the future. Both the American and British soldiers exchanged confused looks. From the future? That's impossible. The 12 figures all spoke at once, their voices echoing the same conviction. No, it's not impossible. 500 years in the future. Altering the past is possible, but we try not to. There are laws against it, because changing the past can drastically change the future. So, what are we doing here? We're tracking and fighting the same aliens that attacked you. In our time, they're known as the Minervista, a hostile group waging war against other races across the Milky Way galaxy. One of the American lieutenants stopped him and asked, "What are you talking about?" He pointed to the sky and said, "At night, you see all those lights and shapes up there, right?" Everyone nodded. "Those are other planets, just like this one. There's life beyond Earth." You could see their minds were completely blown away by what they were just told. They simply couldn't grasp the idea. What would you do if you learned everything you knew was just a tiny piece of a much larger puzzle? The 12 soldiers suddenly appeared, their gear unlike anything we'd ever seen. One of them stepped forward and declared, "The Minervista have come back in time to attack you." He then pointed to a patch on his shoulder. Because, as you can see, we are American also. A wave of euphoria washed over the American troops. The sight of that flag, a symbol from a future they were fighting to create, confirmed their victory in the Revolutionary War. The British side bristled with anger at this revelation. But before the celebration could truly begin, the soldiers stopped everyone. "This isn't the time to party," one of them said, his voice grim. "You have a very long road ahead. Many more battles stand between you and victory. Our presence here changes things, and you don't understand how delicate the timeline is. You were never supposed to know we were here. We were supposed to fight them and disappear. Our plan was simple, remove all evidence of our presence. But that all went sideways when the Minervista attacked you. We had no choice but to intervene. Right now, we are the only species capable of fighting them and winning. The Minervista sent a death squad back to the past, hoping to start a genocide and spread fear among you all. Their logic? If they eliminate you here, in this time, they eliminate us in the future. The American and British soldiers, understood the gravity of the situation. Both sides asked what they could do to help. We had to tell them, nothing. Let us handle this. Honestly, you don't have the capabilities to fight them. It would take both your armies just to fight one of them, with devastating losses. We have the knowledge, the tech, and the experience. We'll take care of it. They weren't happy to hear it, but they respected the warning. The 12 soldiers explained that everyone in the area had to be evacuated immediately, and Minervista wouldn't stop. They were likely already hunting for more targets. The American commander pointed out a small town just 5 miles away. The 12 exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They snapped their helmets back on, declaring they would handle it. Before anyone could react, they were gone, vanishing into the forest in the blink of an eye. As they sprinted through the dense woods, the distinct sound of weapons fire grew louder, coming from the direction of the town. Bursting into the clearing, they saw it, the Minervista, right in the town square, relentlessly attacking civilians. The moment the mechanical whir of the 12 soldiers echoed through the street, the creature paused its assault and slowly turned to face its new challengers. It was a momentary standoff. They were both staring, locked in place. The 12 saw the gruesome scene. Humans, lifeless on the ground, with the Minervista looming over them. Mostly women and children, tragically still. Slowly, deliberately, the 12 pulled their weapons. Both parties lined up, facing each other across the main street. A tense silence before the inevitable. A true standoff. Finally, the Minervista broke the quiet. They opened fire. Brilliant red beams shot down the street toward the 12, instantly met by a return volley of searing blue light. The air filled with the sounds of battle. But the 12 didn't just stand their ground. They began advancing on the Minervista. The rest of the townspeople, paralyzed by fear, hid inside the buildings, forced to listen to the horror unfolding outside, powerless to understand or stop what was happening in their town. Just 5 miles away, soldiers who were once enemies united for a single purpose, to stop the Minervista. When they arrived, the scene was devastating. Women, children, and the elderly lay lifeless on the ground. Amidst the chaos, the 12 warriors closed the distance. They drew their bladed weapons, engaging the Minervista in brutal hand-to-hand combat. This was a sight no human soldier had ever witnessed. It was terrifying, horrifying, yet they couldn't look away. The 12 were incredibly skilled, managing to take down 4 of the 7 Minervista. Some of the creatures' heads were severed, rolling down the street towards the soldiers. As they stared at the severed heads, a new wave of horror washed over them. The eyes and mouths were still moving, twitching with an unnatural life. A chilling question hung in the air. Were these things still alive, even without a body? The battle for the town was finally over. The last 3 Minervista had slipped away, escaping the fury of the 12 soldiers. But the victory came at a cost. Several of the 12 were down, scattered across the street. Their advanced armor was nearly impenetrable, but it had weak points at the joints, a necessary design for mobility. The Minervista knew this, and their desperate final attacks had been precise, aimed at those vulnerable spots. Sometimes their aim was true, leading to devastating injuries. More often, they just managed to anger their towering opponents. As the dust settled, doors creaked open. Townspeople cautiously emerged, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe as they stared at the fallen giants. Just then, revolutionary soldiers rushed into the square, their boots pounding the pavement as they hurried to check on the motionless figures lying on the ground. The screams of dismay were heart-wrenching as news spread that children, women, and the elderly were harmed in the attack on Minervista. But amid the chaos, glimmers of hope emerged. Many of the injured had only pretended to be dead to survive. The sergeant of the 12 immediately started triage for his own soldiers. A few were in critical condition, bleeding out right through their armor. He grabbed a cylinder from a case on his suit, quickly attached something to it, and then shoved the device deep into the wound of one of his men. The soldier roared in pain, but the bleeding stopped instantly. The sergeant repeated this agonizing process on 2 more soldiers, each one screaming as the device cauterized their injuries. They possessed a powerful healing device, but its power was limited. They made a choice. Their advanced tech would be used to save the injured townspeople first. Their own could wait. The sergeant slowly moved among the wreckage, approaching the wounded. With a touch, deep gashes sealed, broken bones mended, and pain vanished. The onlookers were stunned and awestruck, some even dropping to their knees, worshiping them like deities. The healing continued, swift and miraculous. Then the other 11 figures stood tall and simultaneously removed their helmets. A collective gasp rose from the townspeople's shock, even horror. It looked human. But before panic could erupt, an American lieutenant stepped forward, calming the crowd. He explained the unbelievable truth. These were soldiers, just like them, but from far in the future. They were allies. The sergeant finally finished healing all he could. He exchanged a look with his unit. The agreement was silent, but firm. They would take the fallen with them, attempting revival aboard their ship, assessing viability based on age and injury. It was a massive violation of future protocols, a line they knew they shouldn't cross, but the Minervista incident had already shattered all the rules anyway. The immediate priority was restoration, restoring trust, restoring order, and above all, ensuring the townsfolk remained silent about the horrific spectacle they had just witnessed. With efficiency honed by long practice, the team began the grim work of collection. The fallen were gently loaded onto carts, requiring the cooperation of the remaining townspeople, who, stunned into obedience, pulled the heavy loads back toward the glimmering ship docked near the coast. Once aboard, the revival process would begin, a delicate, hours-long task requiring focused energy. 3 of the injured members were assigned this critical job, their injuries significant enough to sideline them from combat, but not enough to prevent them from tending to the silent forms. Meanwhile, the remaining 7, fueled by cold determination, would immediately set off. Their mission: hunt down the Minervista, root them out, and eliminate the threat permanently. The clock was ticking, and failure was not an option. The mission had gone sideways, and now it was all about damage control. A quick stop back on the ship was essential. We had to swap out the power packs for our suits. The sergeant slumped into a chair, the weight of the situation clear on his face. "This is one hell of a mess we've caused," he sighed. No one argued. Our only play now was to contain the chaos and get the locals on our side, keep them quiet about what they saw. The sergeant would handle the townspeople, while the rest of us resumed the hunt for the Minervista. We switched out the power packs, our movements sharp and efficient. We wouldn't rest until we found them and ended this threat for good before any more civilians got hurt. Back in town, the sergeant worked miracles, reviving many who had fallen. Only the elderly, their life force already faint, couldn't be brought back. The 7 soldiers finally caught up to the Minervista, and the battle began deep inside the forest, hidden from all eyes. But the townsfolk knew something terrible was happening. It started with the animals. A wave of creatures, panicked and running for their lives, stormed right through the town square. Deer, squirrels, everything just a terrifying stampede, trying to escape whatever horror was unfolding in the woods. That sight scared us more than anything. Soldiers, townsfolk, everyone bolted inside, slamming doors shut, hiding as the tide of animals rushed past. Eventually, the ground fell silent. Then the 7 returned. They dragged the heavy bodies of the remaining Minervista, dumping them unceremoniously near the ships. They peeled off their helmets and, utterly spent, just collapsed to their knees. But the exhaustion wasn't the end. Because then, The group of people who had been killed and miraculously revived began walking out of the ship's hold. What an incredible sight! The sergeant walked over to the 7 kneeling soldiers. He glanced at the captured Minervista being dragged back to the ship, a grim smile touching his lips. He clapped them on their shoulders. Good work. The mission is a success. The Minervista thought they could wipe out an entire planet with just one death squad. They were wrong. Now for the hard part. We have to convince these townsfolk to forget we were ever here. The soldiers nodded, picking themselves up. They carried the revived civilians back towards the town square. As they arrived, doors flew open. People poured out, shouting with joy, embracing loved ones they thought were lost forever. The sergeant addressed the crowd, his voice carrying over the celebration. Now, we need to talk about the future. Please don't say a single word about our presence here or the creatures you saw today. Understand this. We are 500 years into your future. Just like you, we are fighting a war, but this war is up there. The lights you see scattered across the night sky, those aren't just stars. They are different solar systems, galaxies, and nebulas. Our galaxy is absolutely teeming with life. And honestly, we are just a tiny speck in the cosmic sand. Now, here is the crucial part. To maintain the current future, you absolutely cannot say anything about this experience. If you speak, there's a serious chance the future will change, perhaps disastrously. After a long, tense discussion, the townspeople finally agreed to keep silent about everything they saw and experienced today, which brought huge relief to the sergeant and the rest of the soldiers. The soldiers carefully carried the Minervista bodies, loading them onto the alien vessel. 2 of their own then boarded the strange craft, their hands moving with practiced efficiency as they initiated the pre-flight checks. Just as they were finishing, the town leader approached the sergeant, a look of concern on his face. He asked what would become of the bodies. The sergeant's reply was grim, but necessary. They would fly the ship directly into the sun, ensuring every trace was utterly destroyed. After that, they would return to their own timeline. The leader nodded in somber understanding. At that moment, the Minervista ship began to hum, lifting silently off the ground. "Goodbye," the sergeant said, before boarding his own ship. Both vessels rose above the trees, hovered for a second, then shot straight up into the sky, leaving the townspeople below staring in absolute amazement. Staring at each other, the weight of their argument just melted away. What was their petty fight compared to the future of all humanity? With a shared, unspoken understanding, they guided the captured ship into low Earth orbit and set a direct course for the sun. As they reached the point of no return, they engaged the autopilot. The plan was simple, if incredibly dangerous. Just before the ship began its final plunge, they would make a spacewalk, escaping to their own vessel. The sergeant gave the final command. They executed the plan flawlessly, pushing off the Minervista just in time. From the safety of their cockpit, they watched the enemy ship become a fleeting speck, consumed by the fiery surface of the sun. Wasting no time, they raced out of the solar system, tore open a rupture in spacetime, and jumped back to their own era, leaving that version of Earth's history forever. The townspeople below, witnesses to a miracle, carried the secret of what they saw to their graves. Phantom static, where the phantoms speak through the static.